Earlier today, you said you were open to having a conversation about opening your fundraisers, and that's a question that reporters have been asking for months now. So I'm wondering, when do you expect to actually have that conversation and give an answer on that?
Again, I don't have a timeline for you.
Well, as the candidate, can't you just direct your campaign to open those fundraisers?
What's that?
As the candidate, can't you just direct your campaign to open those fundraisers?
Yes.
And why haven't you done so?
What's that?
Why haven't you done so yet?
There are a lot of considerations, and I'm thinking about it.
Next question. Can you give us an example of those considerations?
No.
This video, this is not a good look, Pete. Honestly, just give me a heads up. That's not a good look. When are you going to open your fundraiser? You have the ability to open your fundraisers. I mean, we've been asking you about this for months now. Yes, I do. Why won't you? There are things to consider. Can you tell us those things? No, I can't. No, I can't. That's not a good look. Now, because the operative question that comes up, when reporters are asking you questions, oftentimes they're trying to get at something. It's not innocuous. This question in and of itself is getting to the root of transparency. Why aren't you being transparent? What do you have to hide? Especially in the sense of people who are giving you money. Now, this is not just the reporters that have jumped on this bandwagon. Another candidate, Warren, has thrown a punch. Now, that in and of itself is fascinating. And I kind of want to talk about all this stuff because there's several layers to this story and the way that this kind of shakes out this particular video. Because, one, Warren throws a punch. B, Buttigieg doesn't want to talk about the people who are giving him money. 3, or I should say C, why doesn't he want to talk about it? And D, should it even matter? Should it even matter? I mean, ultimately, this is kind of one of those software issues. If X is true, then I don't really need to go to Y. Your candidate is being bought. There's several billionaires that are buying off Pete Buttigieg. And in this very particular case, the media is saying, why won't you let us in to talk to the people who are buying you, your investors? And he says, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to open that door. Now, whatever he's saying and whatever's behind that door has to be more important than the optics of him just saying, yes, I'm not going to let you see what's behind the cabinet. I want to talk about it because I think that's a bad look. And you must understand, many of the candidates have reflexively went against that look. I mean, think back for the moment, 2016. Sanders, I don't take money from these other sources. I'm funded and paid for by the American public. That's why I am for workers. Clinton, that's not true for her. And between the two people, it made him look like a paragon of virtue, and it made her look guilty and corrupt. Now, part of that had to do with those speeches that she was taking for all of that cash. Part of it had to do with Bill Clinton taking the money in that way. But the newer candidates in this race made an overt decision not to take corporate PAC money for that very specific reason. They don't want to be tarred with this notion of corruption. Well, Buttigieg has judged that it is better for him to just say, there's no peeking behind the cabinet. There's no peeking behind the cabinet, as opposed to just allowing the press and media to go in and poke about. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. Oh, Patron appreciation will be today at 5 p.m. My wife, Mrs. Thomas, she's off today, so she's going to help me out with that. She wasn't going to do it yesterday, so today is going to be the day for it. There are several ways I could have started this video off. I am not a fan of Pete Buttigieg by any stretch of the imagination. I don't like him. I don't like him at all. I think he's a bullshitter. When that guy wrote in the Root that Pete Buttigieg is a lying motherfucker, I said, yes, Pete Buttigieg is a lying motherfucker. And I don't base that off of identity politics stuff. And if Pete Buttigieg wants to send me an email and we can talk about it as if he, in the same way that he called that guy, I'm open to that. We can do it live. We can have the conversation on the show. Why did you send a document? Why did your campaign send a document and imply that the people in the document, 400 people, were African Americans when really half were white. That's so bizarre. The only reason you would do that is to insinuate that these people were black. Otherwise, the document doesn't really matter. What does it matter if you're having trouble getting the black vote, which Pete Buttigieg is, and in having trouble getting that black vote, you try to find other blacks to say, hey, I'm not so bad. What would it matter if you send a list of 400 white people? Think about what I'm asking you. You're trying to entice other black folks into believing that you're not that bad of a guy and that you polling at 0% of the black vote. There's another story to be told about blacks for Pete. And so you send out a campaign thing and says, look at all of these people who support Pete, with the strong insinuation that the people were black. Half those people were white. The cherry on top being the 4 that you added to the list, who you insinuated were supporting you. One of those guys was an overt, out in the day, running in the daylight Bernie supporter. The other 3 were horrified to find out that you've used them in this way. That's an overt lie. That's an overt lie. That's a massive lie, if we're being honest. That's so over the top in regards to bullshit. And the media, for the most part, let him ride on that. What about the 6%, the 50% poverty reduction? Pete, again, in his effort to con blacks into saying that he's not that bad of a guy, comes out and says he's cut poverty by 50%. Even the Washington Post comes out and says, no, it was 6%. It was 6%. He was cherry picking the cherry pickings in order to come up with that number. So, yeah, if Pete wanted to give me a call and we could talk about it, we can have that conversation. Cristobal and what's his name, the other guy who's on Cristobal's show, demurred at this notion of the guy calling people Buttigieg a lying motherfucker, even in the way that he argues about healthcare or free college, where he makes the argument that, oh, Bernie Sanders' plan is problematic because we don't want to pay for these rich kids to go to school. Fuck those rich kids. He's not talking about rich kids. He's talking about the middle class. He's excluding even members of the middle class. And those people, the members that he's excluding of the middle class, that will actually need to use a college program to pay off college, will themselves have loans while simultaneously paying off the loans for other people. He's full of it. I'm sorry, he's full of it. So, when I report this, I am... But you don't have to take my word for it. Let's say it that way. You saw the video for yourself. He's not opening up the campaigns. All right, let's think about it. Why wouldn't a candidate open up a fundraiser to the press? You saw the video. Think about it for yourself. Well, one reason would be he wouldn't want people to know who's there. Now, that's a secondary question. Why wouldn't Pete Buttigieg want the media and the press to know who's at those fundraisers? I suspect it's a combination of things. We want to talk in private, and I don't want you to know the people who are in the room with me in these or at these fundraisers. Now, to me, you don't have to go to that point, even though that point is interesting just to know who's buying the candidate. More operative is the candidate is being bought. That should matter more. Why doesn't that matter more? It's almost like, hey, we want to know this candidate investors. You mean the people who are buying him? Yes, we want to know who's in the room because that's going to give us some idea of policy. I get that. But the fact that he's being bought, it doesn't really matter which side of the oligarchs, is buying the candidate. The problem here is that the oligarchs are buying the candidate. But fair enough. Fair enough. He doesn't want to know the cellar dwellers that are going to be there in that room. Does it matter? I guess you could say it gives some context to policy that he'll push forth once he gets out. But I got to be honest, Pete Buttigieg, for all intents and purposes, is Obama. He's a blank slate. He has several billionaires that are putting money in his pocket, and whatever or whoever is in that room, those people are going to be organizing to try to help Pete get elected, and they will be sitting in a room with him when he gets in office. He is a continuity of what was there before, meaning he's just the gay Obama. Obama was just the black Clinton, and Hillary Clinton was just, at that point, Hillary Clinton. All of them represent a class, and all of them represent an organization within the context of the Democratic Party, this third way mentality of neoliberal politicians. That's all Buttigieg is. The things that he says may make people feel good again, but the issue is not feeling good. The issue is what you can get accomplished. Those are very dramatically different things. Obama giving 95% of income gains to the top 1%, saving the banks. Those are catastrophic in regards to supposedly representing any notion of the left. My point to you is Pete is the same force. Same politician. It's just the continuity. Him being gay doesn't matter. Also, Warren throws a punch. Now, this is in and of itself fascinating. If you know, Warren doesn't like to, she demurs at punching in this way. She defends herself, don't misunderstand me. And so if she's on the campaign stage, she might rip somebody pretty hard in a defensive maneuver. That. But not that. But she's doing it now. And again, just like Pete refusing to answer that question, it means that something is going on where they are making a conscious choice not to allow people in to view the fundraisers. And in that conscious choice acknowledges that it looks bad. However, it would look worse if they were here. It's like Clinton and her speeches. I'm not going to let you see my speeches. Why? Because if those speeches were clean, she would have just let you see those speeches. There had to be something in the speeches that were horrible and worse than the optics of it. Same thing with Pete. But in this case, the same thing is true for Warren. Warren throws a punch. Warren is coming out and asking about Pete's time working at McKinley, but also saying, jumping on the press bandwagon, Pete needs to open his fundraisers. We need transparency in this election. Warren, I think Mayor Pete should open up the door so that anyone can come in, plus report on what's being said. Those doors shouldn't be closed. Plus, no one should be left to wonder what kind of promises are being made to people that then pony up big bucks to be in the room. Now, that's true, but it's true to a point, right? I mean, this is somewhat funny coming from Warren. Warren is absolutely correct in what she's saying here, but again, to a point. I mean, I don't believe that all conversations with donors take place in the public. I just don't. And even if you may have some of these fundraisers, at some point, those donors organize with elements of your campaign in a certain symbiosis of sorts. Meaning the money goes beyond just the campaign donations. And the conversations go beyond just what takes place in the room. But clearly, Pete cares about who's in that room being seen. So I don't think Warren is necessarily off the wrong foot here, not to mention from a campaign standpoint. She is accepted that whatever is taking place, she has to change policy. And in this changing policy, it's just throw a punch. Interesting thing is why. Now, Pete immediately hit back, or Pete's campaign. If E. Warren wants to have a debate about transparency, she can start by opening the doors to the decades of tax returns she's hiding from her work as a corporate lawyer. Because if you remember, Warren was a corporate lawyer. The thing is, Warren didn't have any issue taking that dark money when she was in the Senate, nor did she have any issue taking that dark money and porting it from her primary into the primary campaign, meaning from the Senate to the primary, nor would she have any issue with taking it after. At the very least, beforehand, she said she was going to take it after, and I know she made a modification of that, meaning that she'd work with the Democratic Party, but she herself personally won't take it. It's just funny that she could throw that punch right now. This wasn't something she cared about before. But she's right. She's right. The reason that Warren would throw the punch is more interesting. Now, take a look at this. This is Morning Consult. For Joe Biden, 29%. Bernie Sanders, 20%. Warren, 15%. Now, if you look at the metrics, this is Warren. She rides all the way up to 21% and collapses down to 15%. Now, this poll for her is generous. There are other polls showing it to be a 10-point drop. She's firmly dropped into the number 3rd spot in the Real Clear Politics average. This was after her bumping all the way up to the point of almost touching Biden. She has, by all definition, collapsed. She's collapsed. The plan that she was going by, this notion of just aping Sanders and trying to ride that didn't work too much. I mean, the moment that she put out her healthcare plan, people realized, oh my God, she's been calling Pete's plan Medicare for All for the last 3 months, meaning she's been dishonest with us. And if she's going to be dishonest with us on something this important, what about the other plans? What about the other plans? Is she going to say this big, luxurious climate change plan, and you find out later on it's Pete's plan or something of the effect? I guess I'm making the point that if you can't be honest about something as important as healthcare and have talked about it for 3 months and then you release it and you find out that the honest part of it is you wanted a public option and you put out this fig leaf of Medicare for All in 3 years when you know that there's no chance for you getting 2 bites at the apple on a piece of legislation like this. It's dishonest. It's dishonest. That dishonesty cost. It had a cost. Pete, in this poll, is at 9%. In other polls, Pete has jumped up. Look at this. Early states. Pete, 13%. Warren, 12%. Sanders, 20%. Biden, 25%. What this means is that Warren's camp realizes and understands that Pete Buttigieg is a problem for her. They're feeding off the same blood vessel. They're both sucking off the white liberal demographic. And I don't know entirely how much of that demographic there is in the context of these two, but they definitely seem to be going up and down based off of that demographic. As Pete Buttigieg goes up, Warren goes down. And to some polls, it's even almost about the same measure. It is utterly fascinating. It's almost like the people are interchangeable between the two. Nevertheless, she knows that he is eating her lunch. She has to do something about that. In the same way that Pete Buttigieg not getting the black vote, getting 0% with blacks, is an existential crisis for his campaign, hence all of the hijinks and the lying, she realizes that Pete is her existential threat. Now these two, because they feed off each other, in a weird way, will keep. It's almost like a lock on the door for both. Now, interestingly enough, the second chance voter, or the people who would Warren, goes to Sanders. Warren supporters go to Sanders. Now, 15% go to Buttigieg, but 30% go to Sanders. Now, I know The Hill, Cristobal, and a lot of people try to make this argument that, hey, Elizabeth Warren supporters are really Buttigieg supporters. A faction of them, yes. But the larger part, if she was not in the race, would go to Sanders. I hope you understand that. I hope you understand that. Pete Buttigieg voters will go to Biden. But there is a faction of there, 15%, that would go to her. And there's a faction of her right now that has gone to Buttigieg. It's there in the polling, it's trends. And again, the specific number is less important. The trends are more important. She's collapsed. Buttigieg has gone up as she has collapsed. She recognizes, all right, this is a problem. I have to stop him. Because as far as he goes, I go down. She has to do something. So she does what she takes the opportunity to do. The press is getting on him about transparency. So Warren throws a punch. The throw punch is fascinating because it gets into the psychology of the campaign and how that campaign is viewing, A, their own demise in order to get them over a hurdle for something that they didn't necessarily do at first, but B, recognizing who the person is that is causing their demise. Fascinating politics. A second point, look at this. The race is clarified. two streams of thought. Do you want to stay where you are in the Obama era, this kind of establishment era Democrats? Or do you want to go forward? You want something new or you want to stay? That's the race. Everybody else is just taking up space. This is the race, almost a rerun of 2016. This time, with the difference being, Sanders doesn't come into the race as a guy to push. He comes into as a guy to win. And he's close. He's exceedingly close. Look, I hope you understand my point on this. It explains a bit of the race. One, Warren throws a punch. Why? She doesn't have a choice. She recognizes her own mortality in regards to the political sense. B, Buttigieg is being bought. Should it matter who's buying Buttigieg? No, but people want to know who's buying the candidate. The issue and the most important thing is the candidate is being bought. Buttigieg doesn't want you to see what's in the room. That means that whatever is in the room is bad enough to allow the bad optics of him telling the reporters no. Warren takes the opportunity to take advantage of this very specific point. And the race seems to be clarified into two camps. Do you want to go forward or do you want to go back? If we get Trump out, the world is great. That's Joe Biden. And to Sanders, the issue is not Trump. Trump is a symptom of the issue. The issue is your country and the chaos that is caused by the inequality and the poverty that people have to go through, the insecurity, the vulnerability that they are perpetually soaking in. I mean, do you honestly believe that that makes a good human being to be soaking in this notion of debt or poverty or chaos or not having ends being met? It works and breaks down the psychology of a person. I'll end this here. I don't trust Buttigieg as far as I can throw him. And the work with McKinley, especially in the standpoint of ICE, is utterly atrocious. Utterly atrocious. Majin Bull, contributor appreciation today. Yes, Majin, that's going to be today at 5 p.m. My wife is going to join me on that one. Maga Zog, I now own a 2500 Peloton exercise bike, and I guess you shouldn't go hungry. What? I now own a 2500 Peloton exercise bike, and I guess you shouldn't go hungry. I have no idea what that means. No clue what that means. I'll leave it here. I don't believe Buttigieg is a thing. I've said it before. I'll say it again. And it's honestly slightly, I partially want to say disrespectful in a weird way. At least that's the way it feels. Intellectually, I know that's not true. The media is putting him in the spotlight. And they're asking him questions related to his past, the police. You have Black Lives Matter intrude upon his event, bringing that issue to the forefront that, hey, blacks really don't like this guy. And it's not because of who he is, it's because of what he's done in that particular community in that regard. Not to mention, they already chose their horses, meaning Joe Biden, and in this case, you could say Sanders, Warren, split the rest. Blacks vote 90% Democrat on a bad year. On a bad year. That number is extraordinary under any circumstance, but on a bad year. They are a large voting bloc within the context of the Democratic Party. That voting bloc has looked at one of the candidates and uniformly said, no. No dice. And the media still says, no, we like this guy. We like this guy. We're going to push this guy up. We're going to give this guy time in the spotlight to see what he can do. And it didn't matter. It still was like, no. And we want to push this guy up to see what this guy can do. It's like they're trying to have different flavors, anything that can stop Sanders, and they have qualms about whether or not Joe Biden can carry the load. Look, I would say this. Whether Joe Biden can carry the load or not, it does seem like the race boils down into two factions. Do you want to go forward? Do you want to go back? These other groups don't seem to overtly factor into this. At one point, Buttigieg or Warren might have been bumping up, but Warren is a false choice. She's pretending to be somebody else, and in doing so, it's still pretending. It's not the real thing. She fell apart when she had to short cards, and her cards weren't necessarily the best. So, I'm going to end this. Yeah, Joe can't put together a sentence, but that doesn't stop him from being leading in this case. Look, the hope is that if Joe loses the first 3 states, would that change people's minds? I got to be honest, I don't know. And I don't think Sanders can assume that in the way that he's running the race. He has to find a pathway to victory that goes around or eats into dramatically that vote share. Now, Biden, based on trends, is going to get the older votes. Sanders is going to get the younger demographic. That younger demographic, black, white, gay, straight, the works. It gets it across the board. As the voter gets older, the voter tends to trend towards Biden, which is the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing. Because one guy is talking about expanding, and I guess it's not weird. I mean, whether or not these guys are not caring about college loans because they don't have college loans. These guys have a different perspective of the world. The catch here is the guy who they're going for was working with the guy who's going to cut Social Security. It's aggravating. It's just aggravating. All right, I'm going to end this. What's happening, Trudy? I didn't see you here. Karen, Bernie 2020, and I'm 65. Fucking A. My mom is in her 60s also, and she is a Bernie 2020. Joe Biden can only if millennials and Gen Z start to vote. So it's being said that this election is going to have more millennials voting than any other election. And if so, that would be a good thing. That would be a good thing, but it would be squandered if it's somebody other than Sanders. At least that's the way I look at it. That's the way I look at it. All right. I'm going to end this. Like, share, subscribe. Oh, as for taking Pete down. Well, if you look at it, Pete is eating into Warren. These two are effectively eating into each other. He's cannibalizing her. That's why she's throwing a punch. Together, they will be 25%. But the catch here is that all of Warren's voters are not Pete's voters. Warren voters are mostly Sanders supporters. If Warren wasn't in the race, that 15% would be with Sanders, not Pete. I'm sorry, 15% would be with Sanders, 30% would be with Warren. Would be with Buttigieg. Jesus Christ. 30% would be with Sanders, 15% would be with Buttigieg. I guess my point is, it's assumed that just because they're feeding off the same lifeline, that's a percentage of her support. It's not the entirety. Most of those people are still Bernie bros, given the opportunity to let that Bernie bro shine. Like, share, subscribe.